Well, good evening, everybody. We are so glad that you are here for our family webinar series. Tonight's webinar is sort of a special because it is a very time-specific webinar. September 23 through 28 is National Hazing Prevention Week. And this year, we're very proud and excited that Virginia Tech is participating in National Hazing Prevention Week. And so our webinar tonight is about those efforts and about Virginia Tech. Before we introduce the panel, or before the panel introduces themselves when we get started, I want to remind participants, attendees, that there is a Q&A function in which you can drop a question. You can see all the questions, even those that have been answered. And then in the chat, we will drop in the webinar chat any links or specific information that you can see. Unfortunately, attendees cannot use the chat, but you can see the chat. And then, of course, panelists, if we want to message, like, if I need to wipe something off my face, you can message me that privately there in the chat. Well, I am just honored to be only the host. I am not the expert ever, and especially not tonight. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and their titles, and about popcorning. So I'm going to popcorn it first over to Charlie, who I've been working with to set this thing up. Charlie, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Barry. My name is Charlie Sloop, and I am a student at Virginia Tech, a senior studying public relations and theater arts performance with minors in organizational leadership and leadership and social change. My role in student engagement and campus life is to serve as a project assistant. And so not only I get to live the student experience, but be able to develop resources as we work with our student orgs on campus and specifically oversee our hazing prevention efforts for all of our registered student organizations. So excited to be here, excited to talk about our year 3 of being in this work ever since Adam's Law, and we'll talk about that more later on. But I'm going to popcorn it over to Rachel.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. Hello, my name is Rachel McLaughlin, a she, her pronouns. I serve as part of our team in student engagement and campus life. My role is the Assistant Director of Student Organizations and Development. Really means I very broadly support our student org community, which is roughly usually somewhere between 750, 850 student organizations at any given time. So there's a lot of them. A part of my entrance into this work really is supporting Charlie and the phenomenal work that Charlie has been doing to keep us in compliance with state law. And then two, lots of education, lots of working with our students to understand how to just be good community members, right? How to care for each other, how to uphold the dignity, which I know Charlie will talk really in depth of what that means for us here at Virginia Tech. So I'll kick it over to our final human, Win.
Good afternoon. Hello, howdy, and hey. My name is Wynn Williams. I am the coordinator for student organizations at Virginia Tech in the Student Engagement and Campus Life office. My main focus is around the new org registration process, so getting those communities formed and recognized on campus, as well as organizational resources. Overseeing the source, our resource center, and making sure that those organizations have access to all the materials and things that they need to be successful as a part of our broader campus community.
Excellent. Okay, Charlie, take it away.
Perfect. And we really want to thank you all again for being here because not only is this a worthy topic to discuss with our family members, but it's a commitment to how to uphold a hazing-free experience, right? We have so many organizations on campus, and so we thank you for contributing to the reason why students are getting involved, and also like how do we continue for them to prosper, to be successful, and to really uphold their values as they're going through our organizations on campus. So why student organizations, right? We have a full team here from student engagement and campus life that are developing resources specifically to these places on campus, whether it's fraternities, sororities, sports clubs, or even any of the subcultures that you see within our organization worlds. There's really like three main topics we want to kind of highlight as the student experience. Providing engagement to their own college experience, right? They get to discover their identity, things that they're passionate about. And when we talk about hazing prevention, we really talk about how those values deserve dignity and respect. So regardless of the organization, they're finding a way to prosper in those specific topics. There's a responsibility and commitment to it, right? There's a way where students can commit to time in their schedule as a part of their experience. And they really get to make choices about whether it's professional development, whether if it's social, and whether if it's giving back to the community, right? Virginia Tech prides itself on ut prosum, and a lot of our organizations thrive to serve others through their organization involvement. And also it's relationship building, right? There's from my experience as a student, like I have met some of my longtime friends through organizations. And so being able to have that shared passion with someone is allows you to kind of like foster that relationship and thinking about how that relationship continues even outside Virginia Tech, right? Once they become an alumni, they're going to remember these experiences. And so a lot of times we will tell students about like how to investigate. This is a time to explore what is going to fit your values and your needs as a student. So you can ask yourself or you can have conversations with your student, right? Do people belong in the organization and do they have similar values? Do they support your students' goals? Like, have this student talked about your goals to you before? And thinking about like how that is a conversation to think about like, what is my next step? Are they welcoming to that student, right? So do you feel like you have a sense of belonging? And that is the whole goal of a membership process, to ensure that the student will belong and be a successful new member. And also the one thing that we challenge students to think about as they're getting involved on campus is, why am I doing what am I doing? Or why am I doing what I'm being asked to do, right? Does this align with the mission of the organization? And does this align with their personal values? So kind of going along those lines, we're going to dive a little bit into the definition of hazing. And so to give a little backstory, this is our third year in the work with hazing prevention here in Virginia. In July of 2022, we had Adam's Law put into place due to a hazing incident at Virginia Commonwealth University. If you want to learn more about that story, I highly encourage you to read up into the story, because it delivered the Love Like Adam Foundation, and being able to continue Adam's story is the reason why we do the work today. So by Virginia Tech standards, and after the law was adopted, we defined it as any mental or physical requirement, request, or obligation placed upon any person for the purpose of admission, initiation, or continued association with a group or organization that could cause discomfort, pain, fright, disgrace, or injury that is personally degrading, or that violates any federal, state, local statute, or university policy, knowing that the willingness of an individual to participate in such activity notwithstanding. And so we broke it down into these different parts to understand that, one, hazing is multifaceted and it has existed in history for a long time. So it exists in rites of passage, it exists in traditions, but also being able to decipher like, when does this become a potential harm to a student experience. And so this is not only physical, but this can also be psychological, right? This is also playing on the concept of this student wants to join the organization, like, how is that being used in the sense of power, in the sense of manipulation? And a lot of this, it lives in a place of secrecy. If you want to learn more about the specific policies in terms of like how we break it down between the physical aspects and the psychological aspects, feel free to go to that QR code. That is going to take you directly to our hazing prevention website that lives on our student affairs page. But you can go into the conduct, you can read more about Adam's Law, and you are able to kind of dive further into what does the policy actually mean. And so now that we kind of like know a little bit about hazing prevention at Virginia Tech, like what do you do? Like what is the kind of like steps to think about when you are faced with a hazing incident? Or just how to kind of be there for other person, right? We have a motto here at Virginia Tech that usually talks about like no Hokies left behind, right? So we want to ensure that a community is there to kind of set up some expectations and ways to kind of navigate situations across campus. We do this through identify, act, and prevent model. So if you see something or someone that needs help, you should do something to assist by kind of talking about ways where you have tactics to address hazing. You're able to see that. Provide space where someone can speak up. Like if a member is going through a membership process, we want to make sure that that student is comfortable in talking to org leaders about their experience. What things are they comfortable with? What are the things that they're gaining from that? And so this is a sense of accountability for members to go towards each other and start that dialogue of what ways we are developing our membership experience to have a positive culture and a culture where people can belong. ACT is the method of actually being able to intervene into the situation. We have a resource at the end of the slide that talks about active intervention, so we'll go into that later on, but there's multiple ways to intervene with a situation. And this is all depending on your personal context, right? If you feel like you're not at the capacity to address the situation directly, you have a couple of ways to think about it as well. You can delegate to another person in your group, right? They are maybe have the willingness to directly approach the situation. And so if you are not at that comfortable level, we want to make sure that one, the person that is going to intervene is also kept safe as well. You can create a distraction and disrupt the situation so that way there is energy not placed in that specific incident and you're able to kind of like have those conversations. And when we go directly to our resources, we encourage students to always document and go to support resources on campus. And when we talk about prevention, one, prevention is kind of leading by our values. So making sure that these spaces cannot be created because our values are staples in that experience. But also it's having the conversations about what are ways that we can make sure that an incident occurs that we have the ability to act. And that's why we have the hazing prevention website, so that way they know where to report, what are some of the previous incidents that happened on campus, and how do I go to a department on campus to learn more information. Oftentimes, we will see alcohol and substance use correlated with hazing incidents, but it's not always present. But we want to make sure that as a part of the training and as part of Adam's Law, that we are educating students on alcohol content as well. And so active intervention also looks like being able to prevent incapacitation from alcohol and substance use and making sure that, again, you are being able to support your Hokies. So noticing signs when alcohol is in play and having conversations around that personal relationship with alcohol, right? If the number one sign to notice incapacitation and alcohol poisoning is throwing up. And so it's important for students to know what are the ways that they can report, ways that they can like be there and present before emergency personnel can respond, and what are the ways that they can continue the conversation around boundaries and consent, especially when alcohol and substance use is involved. We also talk about the Virginia amnesty law here. It's important to know that if students seek out medical assistance, that student conduct will not pursue conduct charges against the individual or organization that sought out assistance. So a key takeaway is that if you are being there and you are cooperative and you are supporting the person that may had a bad experience with alcohol and substance use, that there is a level of protection regardless of your age or legality of the substance. If there's any emergency situation where you need immediate help, it's encouraged that you contact the Virginia Tech Police Department or directly call 911. 911 will direct students to the New River Valley dispatcher and be able to provide the right resources in those specific instances. Earlier this semester, our Virginia Tech Police Department was actually trained in tactics to address hazing incidents. And so it's important to recognize that they also are equipped and being able to provide resources when an incident occurs. So this comes to you all, right? You're probably thinking that this is a lot of student-facing material, and we are kind of talking about like ways that students can talk about hazing prevention at Virginia Tech, but we also want you to be a valuable partner in this experience, right? Right behind peers, around 25 to 26% of students that have experienced hazing will talk about their experience with their family members. So it's important to know how to share information around hazing prevention and what ways that you can delegate resources from the university and kind of be there in the same model of identify, act, and prevent. We kind of talk about warning signs. If you are noticing different behaviors, whether that is a change in academic performance, change in the ways they talk about activities in the organizations they are involved, if you are not noticing that they're not adhering to their own needs, right? It's important that you address those conversations with a sense of care and start thinking about ways that you can be supportive to your student. This also means like if they're dedicating to be a part of the group, but not necessarily sharing concerns or like details about that, right? You want to make sure that you can open up a conversation with transparency and lead that to a place of prevention, which leads to act, right? You don't have to talk about all the information at the same time. It's not a race, it's a marathon. So pace your conversations around alcohol, hazing, and other safety issues. Kind of separate those out. And what's important here is asking things like, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Being specific and addressing your own concern and the signs that you are noticing. You can ask about the membership process of the organization they are joining, ask about the values that they hold, and be able to kind of like have a conversation of whether those values align with your students' values. And most importantly, you want to be able to get to a place where you have that conversation, you're able to develop trust with that student, and finally share out the resources provided by Virginia Tech. It's highly encouraged that you are updated with the most recent information as well. And so by providing the hazing prevention league and learning the efforts that are being done by not only the university, but the state, you're being updated on ways that you can continue to talk about the process, encourage ways to report incidents, and make sure that they are feeling supported even after the incident occurs. So here we're going to knock out some resources so that way you are aware of them and being able to delegate them out to your student. And we talk about resources not only in a reporting fashion, but also in a confidential fashion as well. So if you need a confidential resource where you just want to air out your experience and feel like you need someone to listen to you and not necessarily go through the reporting process, there are a couple resources to go about that. Cook counseling and timely care are going to be your top priority for there because they're willing to work with students not only in person, but also virtually. So timely care is a virtual resource where a student can get 12 free individual consultations during a year's time at Virginia Tech. And also with Cook Counseling, they also provide walk-in options as well. So you can either call the Cook Counseling Center or there are embedded counselors inside the residence halls. So you're able to address your needs depending on your comfortability and how you want to navigate the situation. If you want to go through the Hokies Don't Haze website, it's important that you have access to that reporting form and know that it's an anonymous form, right? So we encourage you to put as many details as possible, and know that any personal identifiers are removed as a part of that reporting process. If you see or suspect anything, it's important that you report it. Even that's immediate danger by calling 911 or the Virginia Tech Police Department, or using things like the National Anti-Hazing Hotline and being able to share those resources to your students so they can make the intentional choice of creating an anti-hazing culture. If you're interested, if the student is interested in diving further into prevention resources, or if you want to share these out as a way to kind of gain more skills on how to be there for fellow community members and fellow Hokies, you can go to an active intervention workshop, which is done by our Hokie Wellness Sexual Violence Prevention friends. And there is a new department on campus where that is housed. So that is a great way to kind of talk about where violence is violence, and we are responsible of upholding community members in the space. And we're also exploring ways to do a deeper dive of hazing prevention, right? We're looking into ways that we can talk about hazing prevention, talk about student experiences, and ways that we can develop alternative ways outside of hazing. So we talk about membership development, we talk about bonding. And so that way we are developing a sense of belonging inside organizations here at Virginia Tech. So that is everything I have for you all today. What are some questions, thoughts, things that we can use to support you?
Charlie, I have a question, and then maybe Rachel and Wynn can pipe in on this too. I did have a family who was here this past weekend for Fall Family Weekend who brought this up before I even mentioned that we were having this webinar. And from their description of what was happening, it sounds to me like this might be universal in some situations, that the student might be too embarrassed to talk to the family members directly about what's happening if they're feeling weird or iffy about a situation. And maybe it's because the student is experimenting with social things, maybe with partying, doesn't want the family to know, doesn't want the family to know that they went out on a Wednesday night instead of studying for the test, things like that. So what's a strategy or a resource for, these family members who are watching this webinar? What are some signs? You mentioned a couple of them. What's your recommendation? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think it comes from, again, like how do you develop relationship with your particular student? And so there might be spaces where you kind of think about like, okay, what is their college experience, right? You're not always going to know the full details of the student's college experience. And for me personally, like there are things where I'm like, oh yes, I am totally going to share this with my family and going to share my experience, but also they might go to their peers instead, or they may go to a professor, or they may go to a supervisor that they work with as a part of like being on campus. And so knowing that one, we all have a stake in making sure that students are having a safe and healthy experience when they're getting involved on campus, and they have the autonomy in choosing where is that comfortability lies at. If it's with peers, I think a national survey said that around a half of hazing incidents were talked about with their peers before they reported the incident. And so as we continue training more students, it's good to know that we are promoting ways that you can have peer-to-peer advocacy and ways that they can direct them to the reporting form.
Yeah, I agree with Charlie in a lot of ways that like most folks are probably gonna chat with their like immediate friends, right? Like I think that that is just exploring adulthood and development and things like that. For me as someone who has a little, I have a toddler, and so I think a lot about like, oh, I'm gonna have to have a lot of these conversations in her experience and in our life together. And for me and with working with college students, I just be there for them. I mean, sometimes just asking the question and just being there makes a world of difference, right? Like not from like a, hey, this is like judgment, but I just need you to know that I'm like really concerned, and you mentioned some things, or I can tell that there's just stuff that's off. Like if I'm not the person to talk to, then like can you connect with someone who like is that person for you, right? Like I think we sometimes put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we care so deeply about another person that like we want to be everything for them. And for some of our young adults kind of going through this journey of just being in college, most of them I think just want someone who's like, yeah, I might not feel comfortable telling you right now, but maybe one day. But like, oh, you gave me that in, and it's something for me to think about that now I can explore that as an opportunity to share, right? Like, that's what I would encourage. That's what I would recommend is being fully present, being fully with them, in whatever way that looks for y'all, like Charlie kind of mentioned.
Echoing Rachel, sometimes it's just asking the right question in the right way. Um, Showing active interest. Like, hey, you mentioned that you went to the club fair. Did you join any organizations? Like, awesome. What traditions do they have? Like, what do you do? And just asking those things, you can gain that insight. As Charlie mentioned, sometimes the hazing can be wrapped up in tradition or in um, like the organization. So it's good to ask those questions, be present, show active interest, and sometimes you'll get that information, whether that's not the question you were asking, but just comes along with it.
That's good. It's also important, families. I guess I'm the one panelist on this panel who does have children who are college age. And it's important because, and Charlie, you mentioned that on some of your tours that some of the alumni or some folks will talk about the exceptions from their time here. And the idea of the exceptions are like the things that they remember were kind of some of the wild events. And it might have been, 1 or 2 days in their 4 years of their college experience, but those kind of events will stand out and they'll speak of them as if they were the rule and not the exception. And I tell our families a lot, like, focus on the rule, not the exception. Yes, it's fun for us to tell our wild and crazy stories from the late 80s and early 90s, but things have changed and they've changed for the better, a lot better. And we Gen Xers might roll our eyes at the focus on wellness and well-being, but it is such an important and positive part of the university experience now. And it really is true when we say no Hokie left behind as an effort to really, really take care of each other. There's a real spirit of students taking care of each other here on campus. It doesn't necessarily mean that it happens 100% of the time, but with this initiative that Charlie is presenting and that this team from Student Engagement and Campus Life has, we're doing a lot more than we did when we Gen Xers were college students, and it's so much better. That wasn't a question. That was just me ranting a little bit there.
It's also, I'm glad that you did because it's important to recognize too that like we're not the only department involved in this work, right? We have a powerful partnership with Fraternity and Sorority Life that has been coming with us to all the initiatives across the state and being able to work with us in developing not only the training, but more resources to go to student leaders on campus. We're not the only one that has the reporting form either. So reporting can also be done through rec sports and the core cadets and athletics. So there are many spots on campus where you think about ways to report and ways that like students are showing up and getting that connection.
All right. We are now at the past the 30-minute mark. So I would love for each of our very knowledgeable panelists to give their final thought, their final recommendation. Oh, and while you do that, I'll prepare the question for we have a question. So, what do you think? What's your final thoughts on these things, Rachel?
Hmm. my final thought, I always have a lot of them. So coming up with like one thing, especially as it relates to our partners in this work, in caring for our students, I would say my final thought is, if you're looking to explore having these types of conversations, I think the big thing, like Charlie talked about, is having them early and really developing that comfortability around things that are really hard to talk about. I mean, um, in my kind of history working in higher education, I worked in housing and residence life for a while. And so I got very comfortable with talking with students about things that, like, you know, is not my like normal everyday conversations that I typically had. Um, and it allowed for me to have such an opportunity to like work with those students and share resources and care, from folks at the institution. And so I would always encourage everyone to, even if you don't know the answer, and that's okay. There's a lot of times I talk to students and I don't know. Just being willing to just have that discussion, open that window again to have that conversation, again, about stuff that can be really hard. And, when we talk about the Adams Foundation and, what Adam went through as part of his experience, before he passed, is just really really tremendously awful. And so we do experience this. This is, part of our reality in a lot of ways. And so just being willing to step into that space, and be uncomfortable in spaces. It is, a hard skill, but I do think it's really important. So that's kind of my big final advice, thought, hope, maybe. And then I'll do one last plug of just like reach out. If you have questions, reach out to Virginia Tech. Be like, hey, I attended this, or I like watched this webinar and some lady was like rambling on about something and I'm not really sure, but they were talking about some stuff. I just want to know some more information. We're always happy to connect and to get you, talking to folks on campus, about anything your students, might be going through. So that's what I got.
We have a question in the chat uh, asking, due to Adam's law, is information on hazing investigations public record? Where is that information available for Virginia Tech hazing investigations? Since it's done through the conduct process, those student conduct files are like sealed for themselves, so they are not public information. As far as any crimes that happen on campus or around campus, the Clery Act is public record, and the university does annual reports for that. So if you're interested about Virginia Tech or any other university, you can look up the Clery Act. That's Clery, and Clery reporting, and then just enter the university's name, and you can find that information there. As far as my piece of advice, it's always better to be proactive with these conversations. Talk to your student, hopefully before they start attending university, or if they're already attending, have that conversation during a check-in that you have at a regular time whenever they're visiting home, and just show an active interest in what they're doing. That way, if there is a change in their behavior, you can notice it.
I'll piggyback off what Wynn said. And so if you are looking to see any hazing incidents that have occurred at Virginia Tech, then at the website just dropped into the chat, there is going to be a button called the Hazing Misconduct Report. This is our way of, in compliance with Adam's Law, to share some record of previous incidents that have happened on campus. And so you can go there, it will tell you the year it happened, what organization, and specific details relating to the incident. And so it's important to, again, like, you have a way to educate yourself, but also as like my final thought slash advice is, find your own way to commit to prevent hazing. Like, it's not going to look the same way. Like, there's many ways to get to Walmart, right? And so we figure out ways to be able to hold space for other students, but also we educate ourselves, we promote, we pledge to prevent hazing, as the Hazing Prevention Network often says in a lot of their campaigns. So look at those activities and think about ways that it can be beneficial for you to have the conversation, or just even sharing with your student of like, hey, this is just something that I saw and I want you to have this resource too.
Excellent. My final bit of advice would be to dig into those resources, learn about Adam's Law, look at the information on the website that we've shared. The signs, the way signs are there. You can learn a lot by what's happened with other incidents. And so, look for those signs, communicate. And then also families, you know what I'll always say, we've had these three excellent panelists here. The resources are here. The resources are available. There are so many fantastic resources available to your student and to you as families, but mostly to your student. Just know that it's here. It just takes a little searching, a little digging, maybe a quick Google search. If you have questions, if you have needs, if you need to reach out, we are here at Virginia Tech to help with that, and want to make sure that we are also doing our part for National Hazing Prevention Week, not just this week, but all year and every year, so that we can protect all Hokies and each other. We want to thank you for attending tonight, and for those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, big thanks to Charlie, to Rachel, to Wynn, and to our many viewers. Thanks so much. Signing off from Virginia, from a beautiful night here in Blacksburg, Virginia. And they don't know we're going to do this, but we'll see if they know what to do when I say, let's go.
Hokies!
Never works on Zoom. Oh, well. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to hit stop on the record.